All right, perfect. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It means a lot. I've known you for a long time, but I mean, our guests, I mean, not our guest, you're our guest. Our listeners may not know who you are. Um, can you really quickly, in your own words, introduce yourself? Who are you? And maybe a little bit of what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Andrea.
Mm-hmm.
I basically just started my own thing.
Mm-hmm.
I have had jobs here and there,
Okay.
definitely kind of going for like healthcare and the health system. But lately,
Mm-hmm.
I've just decided to become my own entrepreneur and create more of my own line of as far as like nutrition and health and
Mm-hmm.
wellness and mental
Mm-hmm.
health awareness, just because
Okay.
those are the topics that are really most important to me.
Right. So, I mean, this shouldn't be a red flag, but this is it says I am unwell.
Yes.
That's not actually the case. I just really like this brand, but it's interesting that you're coming on here to talk about all this stuff because I feel like you've I did see that you created you call a new kind of brand online, right? And I think it's very important. You've mostly because you've really kind of shared your own experience and a lot of people in a little bit. And I think it's very important to when people get advice or get guidance, it's much more likely that they'll take it if the person they're getting it from has some sort of relevant experience, right?
Exactly. I feel
Mhm.
like if someone can relate with another person online, not just say a typical like going to therapy, but if they can
Hmm.
see the person and relate with them that way, it speaks to someone a little bit more.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, it is important. It's important for the healing process or whatever that is, right? Because we all have different situations going on. So I guess just kind of, I mean, we can take step back a little bit. What kind of brought you to this type of work, even before kind of doing your own thing? Was there something specifically you wanted to do? Have you always wanted to do stuff like this since you were young? I mean, I've known you since I think junior high, and I obviously we weren't just like talking about like wellness back then. But was there something that you were always kind of drawn to?
Yeah, it more so started off with just something that I experienced
Mm-hmm.
about 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I lost someone really close to me
Sure.
from a suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just a whole nother factor as far as like what
Sure.
I went through and then having to process it. But
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
after the fact, I went to school for psychology just to kind of discover like why our brains work the way they do
Okay.
and
Okay.
kind of just to gain a grasp on the concept of just mental health in general, just to see if like I can understand it a little bit more and just for the
Mm,
sake of my own well-being. So that's initially kind of what started off. I wanted to just
okay.
understand it, and that kind
As
of went
part of
into
your
me
like your
wanting to,
healing process, kind of,
yeah,
right?
more of like a healing process,
Mm-hmm.
and then being able to kind of take a grasp and hopefully help other people. So that
Yeah.
was where it started.
Okay.
So more from just my trauma that I experienced, not necessarily like back from when I was a kid, but just like
Sure. Sure. I mean, 12
the
years
whole,
ago is fairly recently. We were already adults at that point, right? Or
yeah,
or
exactly.
so we
Well,
thought.
so we thought 21 years old, but I feel like our brains are still growing up until, gosh, even
I
now,
don't
I feel
know.
like
I
being
feel
30,
yeah.
I feel like I'm still
I mean, I'm growing
learning so
in
much.
and I'm growing this way and I'm definitely having some aches and pains that I didn't used to have, but
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, 12 years ago still, yeah, for I mean, for us that wasn't very long ago, you know. So I mean, and you were already in college, so I mean, were you going into college was it an easy transition to make? Kind of were you switching gears and from one thing to another, or did you go into it kind of doing this like health or like
So I did. It
Mhm.
was actually my sister who was kind of
Mhm.
persuading me to get into healthcare at the time. So
Oh,
when this did
okay.
happen, I was going for nursing.
Oh wow, okay.
And then I decided once that uh,
Mhm.
trauma happened,
Mhm.
I took a semester off and kind of took a step back. And then it was the
Yeah.
next year that I went
Yeah.
into psychology and decided that I wanted to learn more.
Mhm.
And so I've always kind of been in healthcare where
Gotcha. Gotcha.
it's just like overall health, whether that be like alternative health or
Mhm. Mhm.
traditional health. Just a matter of me being able to just
Yeah, no,
kind of fill it
absolutely.
out for myself and then help other
Mhm.
people along the way. So,
There's a whole process, right? And it's hard to really separate what we do. I mean, at this stage in our lives, it's so what I'm seeing, and I don't know if maybe you're going through a similar situation with kind of starting your own thing, is that it's inherently a part of who you are. So trying to kind of divorce the two things is very difficult to do. So it's almost an important thing, right? And a very kind of life fulfilling thing to be able to do something you're very passionate about,
mhm,
but also kind of uh, obviously pay the bills, right? And make ends meet. So combining the two is very important. And there comes a point where like your experience starts contributing to it itself, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Right. If you can't escape it, it is you because it has always been you, but now
Mhm.
you're just not ignoring it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I feel like
Okay.
I'm at a point where I'm more comfortable
Mm,
talking about it
sure.
and with it, and I feel like
Hmm.
I know a little bit more.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, and then even just from past jobs, like this past year with
Yeah.
everything that has happened, I actually got a job in the medical cannabis industry
Hmm.
and I was able to help people on more of like a relatable level. And so that kind of pushed me
Sure.
to pursue this. So it's more of just like the
Hmm.
aspect of like hearing from other people being like, hey, you really helped me, or from friends and family that have reached out and then
Hmm.
them telling me
Hmm.
like, hey, can you share this with more people? So that's kind of where it all took play.
Yeah. I mean, it makes absolute sense. It's so interesting because it sounds like you've really gone the spectrum, right? And really kind of looked at it academically. You're really holistically, pun intended, because I think that's your handle on Instagram,
Yeah.
right? But looking at it completely and looking at different parts of you know what can help one heal or learn. I'm a self kind of touted self-help junkie, right?
Hmm.
And or self-improvement, and I'm always looking at different things. And I've only recently kind of started diving into like alternative medicines and stuff like that, whether it's cannabis or anything. And it really does have this kind of this healing property, but it's been a long time coming, and it took me a long time to really get there. um can you tell us a little bit about, like, I guess, post the trauma, about your kind of ride and your experience in getting to where you are today?
Yeah. So post, it was just a lot of feelings, emotionally, just
Mm-hmm.
like being able to
Mm-hmm.
sit with how you're feeling is very important. I feel like at
Mm-hmm.
moments I would want to distract myself with other things, whether that be like friends or work or school.
I mean, did
But
you cope? Because I
initially,
cope a lot with. I mean, when I lost a couple of people that are very close, and I just drank a lot, right?
yeah, and those are completely natural
Yeah.
avenues or outlets
Hmm.
for people to kind of escape reality and want things to
Sure.
feel a little bit normal or numbing.
Hmm. The
Uh,
numbing. Yeah.
yeah, so
Mm.
at that age, definitely I experimented with like I was either like drinking or
Hmm.
I was
Yeah.
experimenting with cannabis and having really bad experiences. So then I kind
Sure.
of stepped away from that and
Hmm.
decided that I would seek other help, like alternative measures, that being like a
Hmm.
nutritionist and my
Okay.
doctor and therapy. And so those definitely were
Yeah.
a little bit more helpful and like a
Yeah.
huge learning curve as far as like an
Uh-huh.
alternative and holistic way.
It's so interesting because if I have a similar, I mean, very parallel, but obviously personal and different kind of experience of like overdoing it and coping and numbing. But
Hmm.
then I think it was no secret that I was like, abstinent from everything for about 5 years, and I was
Hmm.
pretty open about that stuff. And then only in the past, I want to say, year and a half, really kind of coming back full circle to things. But really, during that break, I guess, that step away, as you kind of just alluded to for yourself, really kind of seeking out help and looking at myself, almost to the point to where like coming back to it, I knew it wasn't going to be a coping mechanism anymore.
Yeah.
More of just like now a tool in my arsenal for betterment. Is that something that you experienced?
It is. And it's just a
Okay.
matter of going with it and
Mhm.
creating new, healthier habits. Even those are
Yeah.
very hard to come by. And it's definitely something where you have to be
Mm,
kind with yourself and take one of them at a time. Because there were periods where I was like,
mm.
all of these at once. And then it was overwhelming, where I was like, okay, Andrea, like get up in the morning,
Well, I mean, I think
go outside.
a
Like,
big thing is like, okay, like exercise, right? Like you're like, oh, it's not going to kill me. But if you're doing too much of it, it's not healthy still, right?
yeah, there's
Anything obsessive and compulsive about anything, any behavior, even if it's like quote unquote a healthy behavior, like extreme vegan, extreme anything, it's just not going to be
yeah.
good because I'm like, what are you masking, right?
Completely agree. And there's like an
Okay.
extent of perfectionism that comes with that. I feel like
Mm,
everyone just needs to take it in moderation and balance and
balance.
not be
Yeah.
too hard on yourself for like
Hmm.
having those treats or those like days where you're just like, I'm
Yeah.
just gonna splurge or just take it all
Right.
in and have fun and enjoy myself. Cause I feel
Looking at
like
it as like as
sometimes it's
a
too much.
treat versus cheat, right? I think treat versus
Yeah.
cheat. Like I cheated on my diet. Like, no, it's a treat for being so good,
Yeah, like a
right?
positive reinforcement instead of being like, "Bad, you shouldn't have done that." Because then that's just
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah. How much does guilt really kind of come into play with you and your decisions and your stuff? I sense kind of some agreement in your tone. Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
that with like the whole learning process, like I said before, it's just
Yeah.
definitely, I guess, getting like a little bit harder on yourself about things
Mm,
and not
hmm.
being guilty.
Yeah.
I think now I just kind of take things with ease and flow with it. And if I'm going to have it, I'm going to have it. Or if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And so just with what feels right, I feel like is the best,
Yeah, absolutely.
the best
Mhm.
kind of avenue to take.
How much of it is just kind of listening to your body and what it needs, right? Like intuitively. How much of who you are today is that, would you say?
A lot, actually.
Mm,
I feel like in the past, I didn't quite understand what I was feeling. And so it was very scary.
mm,
And
mhm,
then as I learned more, I was able to like really listen to what my body was telling me, like, you need substance, or you need to listen to your feelings, or you
mm,
need to take a step back. So initially, I feel like now when I have like a struggle or a
mm,
change that I need to adapt to, I can take a step back and be like, okay, I need to focus on this. And
mhm,
it's a
mhm,
little easier now than what it was prior.
mhm.
And so I feel like it's really important to spread that message to other people, because I feel like people who are trying to adapt to a change are definitely a little bit more hard on themselves.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's
So,
not, I think, so. I mean, people may listen to this and think like it seems so easy, right? But like, I,
yeah.
it's a, a reminder to anybody who's struggling that like, by no means am I done with my work or you,
Yeah.
but also we have gotten to our respective places right now vis-a-vis like a very long road as well, right? It's not
Hmm.
something you just arrive at and you're here. It takes some time and some kind of awareness, right, of the fact that maybe some healing does need to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, was there a moment for you where you just felt like incredibly self-aware with the fact that like I'm human. I would hate to say I'm broke, like the word broken, but like I am
Yeah.
flawed because I am human
Yeah.
and no one's
Yeah.
perfect. And I'm forever a work in progress and that's okay. Like the acceptance, I guess.
Definitely.
Okay.
That's really well said.
Thanks. Yeah.
Props. I love
Yeah.
it.
Sure.
Uh, yeah. So I had to have a lot of reassurance from friends and family
Mm-hmm.
being like, Andrea, this is completely normal and natural. You
Yeah.
gotta feel it, and just
Yeah.
it takes time.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, anyone else
Mhm.
in the moment where you're just like, oh, I just want everything to be normal, or I just want to feel like myself again.
The last thing you
It
wanna hear
always
is, like,
takes
"Just give it
time.
time." Like, the
So
last thing you wanna hear in the
yeah,
moment, though, you're
yeah,
like, "It
yeah.
still
You're like, no,
sucks."
this is awful. How is this going to end?
You're like,
Or
"Well,
when
duh,
are we
it
going to do
takes
better?
time," but, like, come
Yeah,
on.
exactly. So
Mhm.
to your question, yeah, I've definitely feel like I've accepted or have become more accepting of
Mm.
just being able to be present
Mhm.
and open to what I'm feeling, whether no
Yeah.
matter what that be.
Yeah, and that's an important thing to kind of be and a place to be if especially if you're wanting to potentially help guide others, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how are you kind of using this platform? Because I think you're I've only seen you on Instagram, so like I mean, what how are you using your platform and what you're doing, or how are you trying to kind of, I guess, help people? Like, are you what exactly? Because I mean, what's your handle name? Wholesome,
It's wholesomely Dre.
wholesomely
Wholesomely, yeah.
Dre, right?
Yes.
And
So it's a work in
yeah,
progress,
sure.
definitely. I have
I mean, I
a lot
love
of
it. Yeah.
ideas, and it's just a matter of putting it all together.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea behind it is kind of I'm working on some writing right now with it's a harder process, so it's just
Mm,
definitely taking me some time because I feel like even still writing it out now is
mm-hmm.
a little hard for me,
Yeah.
even though there's been some time in between.
Mm-hmm.
But just putting the pieces together, it's me writing my story and then the like what is it? Like what I
Mm-hmm.
did exactly to help myself. So just the steps
Yeah.
that I took after what happened.
Yeah.
So that being like the things that I'm most passionate about. I didn't take like the route of medication, and I
Okay.
definitely saw food as medicine. So cooking and food and just like a more holistic approach is
Mm-hmm.
what I'm trying to aim for. And then just
Sure.
like supplements I took and exercise,
Gotcha.
movement
Gotcha.
and therapy. Like I want to put all these topics together so that I can create like I'm trying to think of the best way to how to say
Yeah.
it.
Kind of like a sort of plan, right? Or like
Yeah.
guide. Would you
Yeah,
say
it's
that?
like a
Okay.
guide of different alternative routes that people can take to hopefully
Mm-hmm.
help themselves as well.
I think it's admirable that because it takes a great deal of vulnerability to be able to kind of share one's own experience, but also put one's own creativity in writing and like effectively just like self out there in that way for people to kind of take in and hopefully find some light within, but also opening yourself up to criticism because everyone's a critic these days, right?
Yeah, yeah.
um and or has an opinion about everything, right? So
Mhm.
I think it's very admirable that you're doing it, right? And I encourage you to keep going because it's so necessary. I'm currently writing up like it's something for work. It's a blog about blog posts, right? Like, and I pick a theme, and right now I'm doing health and fitness
Mhm.
for this month's theme. Especially since like the whole idea of beach bonds and losing weight and all this stuff is coming into play. um and I'm kind of in my own personal life, maybe not with myself, but like experiencing watching people kind of go through this just like obsession of equating health to figure and
Mhm.
physique and being thin, and it's triggering to me.
Yeah.
Right, so I mean, how much of like what you do is really kind of addressing the toxic kind of culture out there, and are you just avoiding it and hoping that it's kind of goes by the wayside, or are you kind of maybe being aware or addressing the fact that like we don't necessarily live in a really healthy vision or society?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of it, especially on social media, can always
Mm,
appear very fancy or
yeah.
beautiful, or
Hmm.
it's very I feel like it's hard to get, like, it's very easy to get sucked in and then start
Yeah.
comparing
Yeah.
yourself to what others are doing or what others look like, or
Mm-hmm.
mine's trying to take away from, I would hope, the approach of that it's okay to just be you.
Mm,
Just and
mm-hmm.
do what's best for you ultimately. And
Yeah.
definitely is a hard, like, to take a step back for myself, because I'm not always the most active, or haven't been the most active on social media, so it's
Oh, gotcha.
definitely
Yeah.
another learning curve there, where now I feel like I have to
Create
create
content
content
perpetually.
and,
Yeah.
yeah, create content and post, and it's definitely a lot more time consuming than I had imagined. I'm
Mm.
okay with that, and I have to have my boundaries where it's like, okay, you can create
Mm-hmm.
this new content and write a post for it and take a picture and
Yeah.
post it, but then you also have those moments where you're like, I have to take a step away from this
Mm-hmm.
and have my time, whether that be 1 to a couple of days. So it's
Right.
definitely something that I have to get used to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think most what I've seen even before the only difference I've noticed between this and maybe your personal account is the fact that like this one is you're more narrating what's going on versus your other account you were kind of documenting the similar stuff,
Yeah.
right? It's like you and your animals, and which I think is great. And I think you're kind of you're gardening slash farming
Hmm.
and all that stuff, but like you're just being a little more vulnerable, which is neat, right? Which I think
Yeah.
I personally was drawn to, and I was like, wow, this is very powerful, right?
Hmm.
So um definitely like I mean, keep up that good work, right? Have you noticed a response?
I have, and it's actually very nice to see,
Mm-hmm.
very rewarding in that aspect, where
Sure.
people have reached out and they've been like,
Gotcha.
thank you for sharing this, or you're so
Uh-huh.
brave. And it's
Yeah.
nice to hear those things from other people, and the encouragement and the support of just keep going. So it's,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't express, like, it's like being in like a relay race and those people cheering you on, where you're like, okay, I'm doing something right and this is good.
What's like there's like kind of a delayed kind of gratification, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to like there's so much work that goes into it, and then if you don't get any response or any likes, you're so it's so easy to just be like, okay, I didn't get any likes from it, and be like, get down on yourself, nobody's paying
Yeah.
attention, or
Hmm.
this and that. But it really does kind of it's nice to get that reinforcement. So I can only imagine what that feels like, right?
For sure. I've also
What's
kind of
mhm.
looked at it more like for like a personal blog, but just as a diary of me keeping track of what I'm doing for myself, but also what I'm
Mm,
putting out there for other people.
mhm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a big part of what I see you doing from my perspective is that you're kind of you're consulting, right? You're helping people. You made all the mistakes in the self-help and on the process, right? So you're kind of guiding, you're a guide for people to kind of so they don't have to make the same mistakes you did to an extent, because you've already kind of did a test run with all this stuff.
uh-huh.
So you can guide them with that, right? And I think that's a
Yeah,
very important, you're a very important guide or person to exist out there.
with hopes, definitely wanting to guide people in
Mm-hmm.
directions where they would hopefully feel safe and
Mm,
have a direction to be like, okay, I can try this, or I can maybe implement this in my own lifestyle, and hopefully that would help me as well. And I feel like there's a lot of
mm-hmm.
that already out there, but I feel
Mm-hmm.
like everyone's story is a little different regardless.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, do you I mean, I guess what's the biggest thing you learned in your own personal kind of growth, right? What's the most important thing you've learned about yourself or about, I guess, the healing process?
Just being comfortable with expressing my emotions with strangers,
Mm,
honestly.
yeah,
I feel like that's the most I've learned, and
sure.
being able to just talk about what was on my mind,
Hmm.
or when I wasn't feeling okay, being able to approach someone and say like, "Hey, I'm not doing well right now. I need some extra support." Or I
Yeah.
feel like some people don't always let others know how they're feeling. They kind of just
Mm-hmm.
bury it in, or
Mm-hmm.
they just go about the day. Like when you ask someone like how you're doing, for an example, like most people are legitimately just going to say I'm doing okay, when really it's not always the case. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the hardest things to come by.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of like, now I feel like I've grown to the point where if I am at work or if I'm out in
Mm-hmm.
public, I can be like, I'm not okay right now,
Yeah.
and let people know where I'm coming from. So I feel like it's good
Okay.
to be able to express yourself, because if you don't, then
Mm-hmm.
that can definitely take a toll on your overall
Yeah.
mental mind and your body.
Yeah, I mean, you're not all, and also in the beginning, you probably didn't have all the words to be able to kind of do it, right? You didn't know how to, but you, as you kind of practice and did it, you discovered that vocabulary. I mean, right? Or was
Yeah.
it pretty easy to you because you studied it, I guess?
Yeah. I think so. Like in the beginning, it was a
Mm,
matter of like, is
mm-hmm.
this normal to feel this crappy or to have this grief, or just like normal thing? Like you
Do I
obviously
always feel
like,
like I'm falling into the abyss?
yeah, like why is this why?
Right, right.
Where now I feel like if I'm getting to that dark side, like I know when to
Mm,
bring it up and
mm-hmm. Yeah, I set up like checkpoints for myself, right? Or
mm-hmm,
like if I know a certain time of year specifically is like my body's just going to react a certain way, because yeah, your body has memory as well. Like I set things up to kind of pull me out proactively before I get there sometimes.
mm-hmm.
Um but again, that's a there's whole learning curve as to your own experience, right? And knowing what are your trigger points, what are your things, what are your kind of all of it.
Yeah, so it's just preparing yourself for
Hmm.
what you've already experienced and knowing what to do for you.
Yeah, yeah, and it's kind of like it's surprising, but it's also kind of a relief when you discover you're like, oh, this is a pattern I've had for so many years. I
Yeah.
don't I don't realize it. Also, like, wow, this has been a pattern I've had for so many years, right? It's all about the tone, and but it is kind of like the first step is like once you acknowledge it, like it's very hard to go back to behaving how you were before,
Yeah, I
right? Because
completely agree.
yeah, do you feel that?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I do.
So it's I mean it's a wonderful, wonderful thing, but at the same time very eye-opening, right? Because then there's a level of discomfort that you have to kind of be willing to be.
Hmm.
Um I mean, would you agree?
Yes, completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's I mean, yeah, I mean it's not something that we all are capable of doing at all times of day, right? There's moments for it. But I mean, I think it's wonderful that you're kind of doing your own thing and figuring it out as well. Um, as you know, as far as like the pandemic goes, let's kind of bring it down to like current state of the world. How are you doing? How are you getting through all of this? Have you been vaccinated by chance?
Unfortunately, not yet,
Okay. Are you going to?
but family members have,
Okay.
and I
Yeah.
do agree with it. I'm not going to say that I don't. I think it's definitely necessary.
You got to get your
Um,
your chip and
so
your 5G, man.
yeah, right. I'm going to feel the wave or whatever they're saying out there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's actually been relatively the year prior was very hard for me, which was interestingly enough. Like
Okay.
2019 wasn't my year.
Oh no.
And then 2020
Okay.
came and I was like, yes, I could handle this. Like this is
There's almost like it was
okay.
like you're like, okay, I've been here. Now everyone else is here with me.
Yeah,
So
which
welcome
just
to the shit show.
it's an awful thing to think, like in that aspect, yes. Because I feel like
Yeah, you were already in your
I've
element.
already in my element and have
Mm-hmm.
experienced so much anxiety prior to 2020, just change
Mm,
in general and being able to
mm-hmm.
adapt. But now I feel like a lot of people, and sadly enough, had a lot of change last
Mm-hmm.
year.
Mm-hmm.
in so many areas, whether that be like work or, I mean, the list goes
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
But I feel like I was able to adapt
Yeah.
and get by with it. And I was working all of last year, peak
Mm-hmm.
of the pandemic. So it
Mm-hmm.
was more of just a rush every day where I felt like I was
Gotcha.
in it and I was wearing a mask for 10 hours a day and
Because you
eventually
were
just
working. Yeah.
yeah, I was in the force
Okay.
of all of it. So
How is you were doing cannabis stuff, or are you still doing that, or what's going on with that?
no, so yes, I was doing cannabis
Mm-hmm.
stuff all of last year. So
Mm-hmm.
interestingly enough, it was about a year ago that I got hired on. My start date was 4/20, ironically enough.
Uh,
And within the medical cannabis scene, it was very busy year because a lot of
sure.
people got their
Sure.
medical cards for various reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So working in that environment was very fast and a little bit stressful to say the least, but very educational and rewarding at the same time.
What are your
So
thoughts around all of this kind of these alternative kind of medications, right? Because I mean, I've known this for a while, but like microdosing shrooms, right? Or
mhm.
even I think for extreme cases, ketamine, microdosing ketamine, right, has been
Yeah,
shown to like kind of help with very severe depression. What are your thoughts around it?
I feel like the more it's being studied,
Mm-hmm.
and whether that be with like a licensed therapist or psychologist, even, I know that a lot of people do it on their own. I feel like it
Mm,
can be very beneficial. I feel that there is still more research to be done.
gotcha.
But I definitely do see that being something really helpful in the future, whether that be
Mm-hmm.
psilocybin or ketamine, or even, I mean, just as well as like cannabis is super helpful to
Mm,
microdose. I mean, some clients definitely
yeah.
have higher tolerances, but if you're new to it, microdosing can be just as beneficial as any like other
Right.
amount.
And microdosing is just it's such a small amount that you really don't get high from it, right? It's just kind of keeping you at a certain level in your system. It's like
Correct. Yeah.
50 milligrams of Zoloft, right? It's
So
kind of, I
it's
mean,
more of
which
a
it's just different. There's different
therapeutic.
parts of the
Yeah.
brain, but like, yes.
It's like a therapeutic approach instead of that like more sedative approach that some people are getting out of
Yes.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I've heard wonderful, wonderful things from people, right? And it's really helped people. What are your thoughts around ayahuasca and like DMT and all this stuff? Because I feel like those are more like
Uh,
when it comes back to like self-reflection, those are
yeah,
the
I feel
ones.
that's way more in depth. I had a friend of
Hmm.
mine who actually did ayahuasca, or a
Hmm.
few friends of mine,
Yeah,
and I've done my own research on DMT, never done DMT, but done my
sure.
own research on
Hmm.
the gentleman who was experimenting with it here in research labs.
Okay.
I feel like it's more intense as far as just like an experience from what I've heard, just
Yeah. I
whole
mean,
body experience, that
there's
being
a
like
literal
you
physical reaction to
completely
it. Yeah.
detoxifying and sweating out everything and feeling your emotions.
Or you're
So
sweating, you're vomiting,
yeah,
you're
you're
spewing.
everything is coming from all the orifices.
All of it is coming out of your
Yeah.
heart, everything. Your lips is
So
melting,
I
right?
guess the time and place, and if you're comfortable with that kind of experience.
Definitely
uh,
be careful with who you're with, right? I
yeah,
think
I
it's an
feel
important
like
thing
it
as
needs to be
well.
more of like a spiritual journey.
Shaman led kind of ritualistic thing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not like hey, let's fun trip ball sort of thing.
Yes, like you've got to be in the
Hmm.
time and place where you're like, I need this for myself, instead
Mm.
of that. Maybe I would say like a little older and wiser. I don't know if like the youngins, or maybe I know both ways.
I
I'm
mean, I
not
feel
gonna
like you
try
have
to
to.
like shoot myself in the foot right now, but
No, you definitely. I feel like you have to have a level of work done already,
yeah,
right?
you want to get, yeah,
If you really wanted to like benefit from it, I think, in my opinion,
yes.
right? If you really want to benefit from it, you have to have like a base level of understanding of kind of yourself to an extent, right?
Hmm.
Um, because I mean, at least I don't I'm never gonna fully know who I am, but I feel like now that I'm in my approaching mid-30s, as we all are,
Yeah.
um, I'm at least more aware of who I'm not.
Yes.
right?
And that's a
Because
good way to state it.
I've tried on different masks, different suits,
Mhm.
different costumes, all of that
Different
stuff,
hats, all the good
all
things.
those things, right? So
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, those aren't for me, but so yeah, definitely like waiting to do it for the right time. There's this level of kind of like spiritualism that comes with that. Do you consider yourself a spiritual person?
I would say yes,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like as spiritual wise, I'm still figuring that part of me out a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a growing factor, I want to
Yeah,
say.
yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Like,
you wouldn't say that because spiritualism and religion is two different things, and I think a lot of people conflate those things, right?
yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of resentment around religion, obviously organized religion, because of past and history and the cultiness of it.
Mm-hmm.
But spirituality being more of just like what I call it is a willingness to kind of be out of self, right?
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
think bigger than thyself kind of thing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It
Okay.
does. I would
Yeah.
say yes to that. And then I feel it's just also part of like
Mm,
like what steps you take to be spiritual, I guess, whether that
mm.
be or what lifestyles I guess you take.
I mean, there's
Does that
like
make sense? Just as far
yeah,
as like
yeah.
people who practice like mindfulness, I could see that as like a
Mm.
spiritual outlet as far as you doing that for yourself or within community or
Yeah, I haven't said this in a while, but I have a sense of like a sense of a higher power, right? Something that's bigger
mm-hmm,
than me. Like I only have control of certain things, right? And it's
mm-hmm,
not that I believe in creationism, but it's like the my higher power is this feeling that I get, this feeling of just like right sizedness. I'm like reminding myself that I'm very small on
mm-hmm.
this planet flying through the solar system, chasing a ball of fire. Pretty insignificant, right? So it's kind of a very humbling kind of feeling.
Yeah.
So when I get it from different things, but what I get it for sure from is seeing the moon and the sun out at the same time, because it reminds me of a couple of films that I've seen, but also the fact that like, yeah, I am on this planet, surrounded by rocks, and I'm this tiny little thing.
Mm-hmm.
So my problems really, how big are they really?
Yeah.
Right? Because they're in here.
Mm-hmm.
So that feeling for me is my higher power. So I consider the sun and the moon my higher power because it gives me that feeling, right? It's not the only
Yeah.
thing. But I think there's the humility that's where kind of I feel like my spirituality comes from. And that some people get it from, mindfulness, from meditation, from working out,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you have kind of something like that that really kind of centers you?
Yeah, I do actually. So
Mm,
honestly, me being outside working in my garden has been
mm,
like, if we're looking at more like a spiritual outlet, it would be
yeah.
just me being with nature
Hmm.
and being able to watch something grow from a seed to a plant and then
Yeah.
also having that be something that I can cook with. And
Mm,
so there's so many different like variables of
hmm.
just being outside and being able to ground yourself
Yeah.
just in nature with
Yeah.
the the planet that you live on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's different for everyone, right? But like,
It
it's that
really
feeling.
is.
And I think a big part of holistically kind of being, complete and working on oneself requires a level of just kind of, or something that allows you to center yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, to get away from ego, as many put it, because ego will run you into the ground.
Yes.
So I think it's a very important thing. So and I think it's wonderful that you're doing all this stuff, right? So I mean, are you mostly just kind of again producing content and helping people by being a voice, or are you proactively like helping people?
So right now, just
Mm-hmm.
more of a personal voice for people
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
with works in progress of
Mm.
hopefully health coaching.
Good. That's a
So
great.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
How are people able to contact you? Is it just primarily Instagram right now?
Right now, just Instagram. I
Mm-hmm.
would. like in the future work on a website, and then I am going to be taking a few other courses just
Awesome.
as
Mm-hmm.
more continuing education for like the nutrition outlet, and then also more mental health stuff. So like some psychology stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
I want to just gain that certification as far as having a little bit more,
It shows you like credibility and whatever.
not necessarily like credibility, but just so like I have something
Yeah.
else that I can provide to other people.
Okay.
So
Like, so you're diverse in what you can provide.
yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
Sorry for putting words in your mouth. No, I think sometimes it's like, I believe in this stuff all the way, right?
Mhm.
I wholeheartedly do believe in this stuff, but there's so many people out there. Like again, everyone's a critic. So many people out there that are just so willing to just put you down because they're like, it's BS or whatever, and they don't really give it a fair shot because I think it really does work, you know.
Mhm.
So fortunately or unfortunately, sometimes those things, certifications,
Yeah,
come in handy or not. So that's where I'm coming from and where those words came from. So again, I
yeah.
apologize for that, but um I really do find you completely credible already, right? So keep doing what you're doing. So what's the handle again?
It's wholesomely Dre.
Wholesomely Dre. All right, cool.
Yes.
And
So
I'll
I
share it and
usually,
I'll
a lot
tag
of
you.
people just call
Mhm.
me Dre in general. So I'm Andrea, but people call me Dre.
Was
So
it? I
kind
mean,
of
I
looking
guess
at
in
it,
high
yeah.
school, was it just Drea, right? Or
Yeah.
yeah.
I've had so many nicknames. So the list
Okay.
can go
All right.
on, but
Yeah,
I'm
for
sure you
sure.
remember a few, but
I mean, it's just years ago at this point.
yeah, but
Jeez. I mean, because you went to TAF too, right?
I did.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
went to TAF, but I don't think we went to elementary school together. Um, yeah. I mean, time flies, right? Because if we're looking 12 years back and that was when we were 21, that's kind of
Yeah.
terrifying to do the math, thinking back to it being 11 and 12,
Right.
right? Because that's 20 plus years. So
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow. Where's time gone? Too
it's not here
fast.
anymore. Yeah, seriously. Well, here's to 20 more, right? Whatever you're calling yourself
Thanks,
these days.
Oscar. Thanks.
I really appreciate you being on. We'll debrief really quickly, but for you guys listening, thank you so much for listening. Go support Andrea here. Wonderful individual. Remember that I love you guys. We'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.